Today we are graphing inequalities. We're looking at two variable inequalities. Before we start, I just want to make sure that you understand that when you're graphing linear inequalities, you're trying to find the region that makes your inequality true. And so you want to make sure that all your inequalities are in slope-intercept form. So let me write that for you so you can remember. Because that's going to make it easier for you to graph. And just to remind you, that's y equals mx plus b. But of course, the equal sign will now be an inequality. And another thing you need to know, if it's greater than or less than, we're going to use a dashed line, because that means that any point that falls on the line is not included. And if it has an equal sign underneath it, this will be a solid line, which means any point that falls on the boundary line is included. And another thing you need to remember is where to shade. Greater than or equal to, we would either shade above the line or if it is a vertical line. In vertical lines, we shade everything to the right of the line. So above or right means greater, and then less than or equal to, we shade below the line or everything to the left. Shade to the left, because that's where everything is less than. So those are things you want to remember when you are graphing. Okay, we'll start with this inequality. If you notice, it's already in slope-intercept form, so that's good. So we can go ahead and start. And my y-intercept is -1, so I'll start there. And my slope is +3, so I'm going to go up 3 over 1. And with these graphs, here again, you want to try to use graph paper because it makes it easier. Okay, any point on this line is not included, so we're going to use a dashed line to connect. Remember, you only need 2 points to draw your line. And then it says greater, so we're going to shade everything above this line. And if you're ever in doubt, you can use what we call a test point. And you can always check. I'm going to use 0, 0 because that's easy. So I'm going to plug in 0 for y and 0 for x just to make sure I shade it in the right area. So I'm going to get 0 is greater than -1. That is correct, so that means you shade in the right area. If it would have been false, that means that you shaded in the wrong area. So now you try our got it problem. Okay, you're going to graph y is less than or equal to -2x plus 1. And then we'll check our answers after you resume the video. Okay, and this is what you should have gotten. My y-intercept now is +1, and my slope is -2. And notice everything on this line is included, so we have to use a solid line. And it's less than, so I shade it below. Remember, you can always use a test point. Here's 0, 0. And plug in. And then we'll get 0 is less than or equal to 1, so that is true. So you shaded in the correct area. Okay, here is an absolute value inequality. And if you notice on the left side, y is not by itself. So I'm going to change it so it is. So So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract that 1. And I'm going to leave the negative in front. And then I'm going to divide everything by -1. Now that means that what's in front of the absolute value, you have to be careful because we're dividing by a negative. So that means that you have to remember to switch the inequality. So what's in front of the absolute value becomes negative, not what's inside. And then, of course, the -1 becomes +1. So if you remember from our previous lesson, we always start off with our parent graph. And then the negative means it's going to reflect, so it's going to be an upside down V. And then I'm going to take each point and move it left 2, up 1. Well, that's left 2, but then I need to move each point up 1. Left 2, up 1. Left 2, up 1. Let me move this. Okay, and then just to practice, our vertex is 2, 1, or -2, 1. And if you notice, I made my graph solid, but you have to check to see should it be solid or dash, because there is no inequality or no equal sign underneath. This line has to be dashed. And that's one thing most students forget. Now it says greater, so that means we have to shade everything greater than this line. You can always test the point again. And we can use 0, 0. So I'm going to plug in 0 for y and 0 for x. So I got the absolute value of 2 is 2. Then I got the negative in front. So I got 0 is greater than -1. And that is true, so we shaded in the right area. So now you try one. Okay, here's yours to try. Don't forget to put it, get y by itself first. And then we'll check our answers. Okay, here's my graph. I started with my 5 points, and I did a vertical stretch of 2, so that's why it looks a little narrow. And I shifted them right 1, up 4. And so since it says greater than or equal to, I have a solid line, and everything greater would be inside the V. And I'm going to show you an example of when I choose 0, 0, 0 to show that it's not outside the V. 0 is greater than 2, 0 minus 1 plus 4. So we're going to get 2 times the absolute value of -1, which is +1. So that's 2 plus 4. 0 is greater than or equal to 6. This is not true. So that means we do not shade where 0, 0 is. So that's an example when you plug it in and it doesn't work. So you'll know which way to shade. Okay, so make sure your absolute value inequalities, the y is by itself, just like with the linear inequalities. Y always has to be by itself. If you have fractions, you want to multiply everything by the common denominator to get rid of fractions. And of course, if it's decimals, you want to make sure you multiply by the place value of the decimal. All right, now let's try to write an equality when they give us the graph. Okay, here's our graph. I know it's kind of hard to see because I shaded in black, and I probably should have shaded in a different color so you can see. Okay, first thing you want to do is figure out your vertex. And here's my vertex, which is H and K, which is 3, -2. Then you want to see what your slope is. Up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. So that means A would be 1. And then you see it's a dashed line, and it's shaded greater. So when you write your inequality, it'll be Y is greater than A is 1, and then X minus 3 minus 2. So that would be your erases. Inequality for that graph. And you can do the same for an equation. So let's say they gave us this. And okay, so if it's an equation, you want to find where it hits the y-axis, because that's your b. So it's 3. Then you want to find your slope. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. It was negative because it's sloping to the left. 3 over 4. And then you need to figure out, it's shaded below, so you know it has to be less than. And the line is solid, so it has to have an equal sign. So when you write the equation, then it's going to be y is less than or equal to -3 or x plus 3. And there is your equation, or inequality. So you could do that with absolute value, or you can do it with a linear inequality. And then there you have it.